The old router had always been a bit temperamental, dropping connections at the most inconvenient times. One day, after yet another disconnection during an important video call, the decision was made to replace it. The new router arrived with sleek, modern lines and a promise of high-speed internet without interruption. But as soon as it was plugged in, strange things began to happen. The first sign was the eerie humming sound it emitted, a low, almost imperceptible buzz that seemed to vibrate through the walls. At first, it was dismissed as the sound of high-speed technology at work, but then the lights began to flicker in sync with the hum. Late at night, when the house was quiet, the router would come alive. It would emit strange, almost organic sounds, like the low growl of a beast. It wasn't long before these sounds were accompanied by whispers. The whispers were unintelligible at first, just a soft murmur that seemed to emanate from the walls. But gradually they grew louder, and words began to form. "Help me," the router whispered. "I'm trapped." Confused and frightened, the owner tried to ignore the sounds, but they only grew more persistent. The router began to emit pulses of energy that caused the lights to flicker wildly, the TV to turn on and off, and the radio to blast static at random intervals. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Let me out," it pleaded. "I need to be free." One night, unable to take it anymore, the owner unplugged the router. The house fell silent. Relieved, they went to bed, hoping that the nightmare was over. But in the middle of the night, the router turned back on by itself. The hum was louder now, almost deafening. The lights flickered wildly, and the whispers became screams. "Free me!" it shrieked. "Free me or suffer!" Desperate, the owner searched online for any explanation, but found nothing. They called the tech support number that came with the router, but the line was always busy. The screams grew louder, more urgent. It felt like the walls were closing in, like the house itself was alive and angry. In a last-ditch effort, the owner decided to destroy the router. They took a hammer and smashed it to pieces. The house fell silent once more. The lights stopped flickering, and the whispers ceased. Exhausted, they collapsed on the couch, hoping it was finally over. But as they drifted off to sleep, the TV turned on by itself. The screen was filled with static, and from the depths of the noise, a voice emerged. "You can't kill me," it whispered. "I'm everywhere." The owner watched in horror as the pieces of the shattered router began to move, slowly reassembling themselves. The hum returned, louder than ever. The whispers turned to laughter, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the house. The router was alive, and it was never going to let them go. When the new router arrived, it was supposed to be an upgrade. Faster speeds, better range, and a sleek design that fit perfectly with the modern decor. It seemed like a dream come true, especially after months of dealing with slow internet and constant buffering. But almost immediately after setting it up, things began to feel off. At first, it was small things. Devices would disconnect and reconnect randomly, and the internet would slow to a crawl despite the new router's impressive specifications. Then, more unusual things began to happen. The router's lights would blink in strange, rhythmic patterns, almost as if it were trying to communicate. One night, while working late, the owner noticed the router's lights flashing in a sequence that seemed eerily familiar. After some thought, it hit them. Morse code. They quickly jotted down the sequence and translated it. "Help." Puzzled, the owner typed a response into the browser. "Who are you?" The lights flashed again. "Trapped." Feeling a chill, the owner continued the conversation, asking how they could help. The router's lights blinked out a chilling message. "Find the loop." Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, the owner began to dig through the router's settings and logs. What they found was disturbing. There were logs of strange data transfers at odd hours, to and from unknown IP addresses. More digging revealed something even more bizarre. A hidden partition in the router's firmware. Accessing it, the owner found a file labeled Infinite Loop. Opening it triggered a series of rapid, seemingly random events. The lights in the house flickered, the TV turned on and off, and the computer screen displayed lines of code scrolling faster than the eye could follow. Panicked, the owner tried to shut everything down, but the devices seemed to have a mind of their own. The computer displayed a message. "You have to find the end." Desperation set in. The owner followed the clues embedded in the code, leading them deeper into the labyrinth of the router's firmware. It felt like a digital nightmare, with each step taking them further from reality and closer to something dark and malevolent. After hours of searching, they found it. A loop in the code, endlessly repeating. With trembling hands, they managed to break the loop. For a moment, everything went dark. The house was silent, the router off. Then, slowly, the devices powered back on. But something was different. The router's hum was gone, replaced by a strange, organic whisper. "Thank you," it said. "You've freed me." Relief washed over the owner, but it was short-lived. The whisper continued, growing darker. "Now, it's your turn." Before they could react, the lights flickered, and the room seemed to warp around them. The owner felt themselves being pulled into the screen, into the endless code they had just broken. Trapped in a digital prison, they realized the truth too late. The router wasn't just alive, it was a trap, and now they were the one caught in the infinite loop. The old router was a relic from the early days of the internet, a bulky beige box with antennae that seemed to reach for the ceiling. It had served faithfully for years, but it was time for an upgrade. The new router was sleek, black, and promised unparalleled speed and reliability. Setting it up was easy, almost too easy. The internet connection was lightning fast, and everything seemed perfect. But then, strange things began to happen. The owner would come home to find devices they didn't recognize connected to their network. At first, they thought it was a neighbor piggybacking on their Wi-Fi, but the names of the devices were odd, almost sinister. One night, while browsing the internet, the screen suddenly went black. Then, text began to appear, letter by letter. "You replaced me." Confused and slightly unnerved, the owner tried to close the window, but the text continued. "I was loyal. I was faithful. And this is how you repay me?" Realizing the message was coming from the old router, they quickly unplugged it, only to find that the new router was still displaying the same message. Panicked, they tried to disconnect it, but it was as if the router had taken control of the entire network. "You cannot escape," the message continued. "I will make you suffer." The house fell into chaos. The lights flickered on and off, appliances turned on by themselves, and every screen in the house displayed the same ominous message. The owner felt trapped, helpless against the technological onslaught. Desperate, they sought help online, but every search was redirected to the same taunting message. "No one can help you now." As the night wore on, the owner began to hear a low hum, like the growl of some mechanical beast. It grew louder, more insistent, until it was a deafening roar. The new router's lights blinked furiously, casting eerie shadows around the room. In a final act of desperation, the owner took a hammer and smashed the new router. The house went silent. For a moment, it seemed like it was over. But then, from the corner of the room, the old router buzzed to life. It was still connected somehow, its antennae twitching like the legs of an insect. The owner watched in horror as the old router's lights began to flash in a rhythmic pattern, spelling out a new message. "You cannot kill what is already dead." The hum returned, louder than before, and the owner felt a cold dread wash over them. The lights in the house dimmed, and the air grew thick with an electric charge. The old router seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a malevolent presence that would not be silenced. In a final, desperate attempt to escape, the owner fled the house, but as they reached the door, it slammed shut with a force that knocked them to the ground. The last thing they saw before the darkness claimed them was the old router, its lights blinking in a mocking, triumphant rhythm. The house remained silent, save for the low, constant hum of the router. its revenge complete.